The fluorescent lights in the condo's community room buzzed like angry wasps, casting that sickly yellow glow that made everyone look like they were fighting the flu. I sat in the back row, nursing my third cup of coffee and wondering why I'd volunteered to be the building's property manager. The answer was simple. Someone had to deal with the complaints, and apparently I was the only one stupid enough to raise my hand. "Next item on the agenda," droned Mr. Heller, our HOA president, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "is the ongoing issue with parking violations in the guest spaces." My wife Samantha shifted in her seat 3 rows ahead of me. Even from behind, I could see her checking her phone, probably scrolling through her real estate listings or texting her clients. She looked perfect, as always, blonde hair swept into that effortless style that probably took her 40 minutes to achieve, wearing a cream-colored blazer that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Eric," Heller's voice cut through my wandering thoughts, "you're our property manager. What's your solution to this problem?" I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of 24 pairs of eyes turning toward me. The thing about being married to the most successful real estate agent in town is that everyone expects you to be equally impressive. Instead, they get me, the guy who fixes leaky faucets and mediates neighbor disputes about noise levels. "Well," I began, clearing my throat, "I've been documenting the violations, and most of them occur during evening hours when residents have guests over. I suggest we implement a guest parking permit system." "Oh, please," Samantha's voice rang out, clear as a bell and twice as sharp. She turned in her seat to face the room, that practiced smile spreading across her face like she was about to close $1 million deal. "Does anyone else think Eric's solutions are about as exciting as watching paint dry?" A few chuckles rippled through the room. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't the first time she'd made me the punchline of her social performance. "I mean, seriously," she continued, standing now and addressing the room like she was hosting her own talk show. "Someone should just take my husband and put him out of his misery. He's been working on this parking thing for months." The laughter was louder now. I felt heat creeping up my neck, but I forced myself to stay calm. 20 years as a cop before this gig had taught me how to keep my cool under pressure, even when that pressure was coming from my own wife. Then Brandon Pierce, the 29-year-old tech entrepreneur from Unit 4B, raised his hand with a smirk that made me want to rearrange his perfectly symmetrical features. "I'll take him," Brandon said, and the room erupted in laughter. But I caught something in that moment. The way Samantha's smile flickered, just for a second. The way her eyes darted to Brandon and back to the crowd. It was subtle, but after 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to read her tells. "Actually," Samantha recovered quickly, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used with difficult clients, "I have plenty of room for him at my place. Oh wait, that is my place too." The room was eating it up. Even Mrs. Quimby, the 70-year-old busybody from 2A, was cackling behind her hand. But I wasn't looking at them anymore. I was watching the exchange of glances between my wife and Brandon Pierce, the way his girlfriend Alicia's face had gone stone cold beside him. My marriage didn't just crack in that moment. It shattered somewhere between the cheese platter and the punchline, leaving me standing there with the pieces cutting into my hands. I sat back down without another word, letting Heller move on to the next agenda item. But my mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been too trusting or too stupid to connect before. The late nights Samantha claimed were client meetings, the way she'd started dressing differently, buying new clothes she never wore around me, the sudden interest in fitness classes that always seemed to run long. The meeting dragged on for another hour, covering thrilling topics like landscaping budgets and elevator maintenance schedules. I participated when required, answered questions about building repairs, and played my part as the reliable, boring husband who fixed things and stayed out of the way. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. When it finally ended, people filtered out in small groups, their conversations buzzing with gossip and complaints. Samantha was holding court near the refreshment table, surrounded by her usual admirers. Marla from 3C, Kelly her influencer best friend who was visiting for the week, and a few other neighbors who hung on her every word like she was dispensing wisdom instead of real estate advice. I was packing up my folder of building reports when she approached me, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. "Eric, you looked like you were about to fall asleep up there," she said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Maybe next time try to show a little enthusiasm." "Enthusiasm," I repeated, testing the word. "Right, because parking permits are supposed to be riveting entertainment." She rolled her eyes. "You know what I mean? You just stand there like a statue. People want to see some personality." "Your personality was certainly on full display tonight." Something sharp flashed in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" Nothing at all, Sam, just making an observation. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to decide whether to escalate this into a full argument or save it for later. She chose later. I'm staying at my aunt's tonight, she said, digging her keys out of her purse. I can't stand looking at your face right now. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick response, then showed her the screen. Tell your ex he can have you soon. Her face went pale, then flushed red. The keys started shaking in her hand, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine emotion crack through her polished exterior. What did you just say? I think you heard me clearly enough. She stood there for another moment, mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Then she spun around and marched toward the exit, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. But 20 minutes later, I heard those same heels in our hallway, followed by the sound of our front door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. I was sitting on our leather couch, her choice, not mine, when she stormed into the living room, keys still clutched in her white-knuckled fist. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you embarrass me like that? I looked up from the building maintenance report I was pretending to read. Embarrass you? That's rich, coming from someone who just turned me into a comedy routine for the entertainment of our neighbors. That was just... People were laughing. It was harmless. Harmless. I set down the papers and really looked at her, the defensive posture, the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes, the slight tremor in her voice that meant she knew she'd crossed a line. Tell me something, Sam. When did I become the joke in our marriage? You're being ridiculous. Am I? Because from where I was sitting tonight, it looked like you were auditioning for a different audience, particularly one specific member of that audience. The color drained from her face again. I don't know what you're talking about. Brandon Pierce, Unit 4B, 29 years old, drives a Tesla, thinks his tech startup makes him God's gift to the world. You're paranoid. Maybe, or maybe I'm finally paying attention. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, she turned and walked toward our bedroom, her footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. A few minutes later, I heard the shower running. I sat there in the quiet living room, surrounded by the expensive furniture and carefully chosen decorations that were supposed to represent our successful life together. Everything was perfect, coordinated, magazine-ready, and all of it felt like a lie. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy, my old partner from my police days. How'd the condo meeting go? Still dealing with complaints about Mrs. Chen's wind chimes? I typed back, worse. I think my wife just publicly auditioned for a divorce. Want to grab a drink tomorrow? Sounds like you need one. Yeah, I think I do. I turned off the lights and headed toward the bedroom, where I could hear Samantha moving around, probably going through her elaborate nighttime routine, but I stopped at her laptop, sitting open on the kitchen counter where she'd left it in her rush to confront me. The screen was still lit up, showing her email inbox. I shouldn't have looked. In a healthy marriage, I wouldn't have looked. But healthy marriages don't include public humiliation and suspicious glances across community meeting rooms. I clicked on her messages, and my world shifted on its axis. The laptop screen glowed in the darkened kitchen like a portal to another dimension, one where my wife was someone I'd never met. My hands trembled slightly as I scrolled through the messages, each one a small explosion in my chest. The folder was labeled B and contained months of conversations that read like a romance novel, written by someone with no imagination and no shame. Brandon's messages were full of corporate buzzwords mixed with amateur poetry. Your innovative approach to our partnership creates synergistic opportunities for growth. Beautiful. Samantha's responses were worse. I dream about optimizing our collaborative efforts. I had to stop reading after the third message exchange because my coffee was threatening to make a return appearance. But I forced myself to continue, screenshotting everything and uploading the images to a secure cloud folder I'd set up years ago for building maintenance records. The shower was still running. I had time. The messages painted a picture of a relationship that had been developing for months, right under my nose. Late-night strategy sessions that were actually dinner dates. Weekend property viewings that were actually weekend getaways. The fitness classes that ran long were actually not fitness classes at all. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the casual cruelty with which they discussed me. Brandon, how's the maintenance man today? Samantha, same as always. Fixing things that aren't broken and breaking things that work fine. I found myself laughing, actually laughing, at the sheer stupidity of it all. Here I was, the guy who'd spent 15 years trying to be the perfect husband, and my wife was treating me like a broken appliance she was too lazy to replace. The shower stopped. I quickly closed the laptop and moved back to the couch, picking up my maintenance reports like nothing had happened. Samantha emerged from the bedroom 20 minutes later, wearing the silk pajamas I'd bought her for Christmas, the ones she claimed were too fancy for everyday wear. Apparently, publicly humiliating your husband counted as a special occasion. "I'm going to bed," she announced, not looking at me. "Good night, Sam." She paused at the bedroom doorway. "Eric, about tonight? Don't worry about it. We all have bad days." She studied my face, probably trying to figure out if I was being sincere or sarcastic. After 15 years, she still couldn't tell the difference. "Right. Well, good night." The bedroom door closed with a soft click, and I was alone with my thoughts and my screenshots and the growing realization that my marriage had been over for months. I just hadn't gotten the memo. I pulled out my phone and opened the building's private group chat, the one reserved for board members and building staff. 24 people had access to it, including every neighbor who'd laughed at Samantha's jokes tonight. I created a new message and attached the screenshots, then typed, "Found these on the community laptop in the meeting room. Thought the board should be aware of potential conflicts of interest regarding building decisions." My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Once I pressed it, there would be no going back. The gossip fire would ignite, and everyone in the building would know exactly what kind of woman they'd been applauding tonight. I pressed send. Then I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, sat back on the couch, and waited for the fireworks to begin. My phone started buzzing within minutes. First Mrs. Quimby. "Oh my goodness, Eric, I had no idea." Then Marla from 3C. "This is so awkward. Should we delete these?" Then Derek, the young handyman who helped me with building maintenance. "Boss, you okay?" But the message that made me smile came from Tommy. "Holy hell, partner. You just lit a match in a fireworks factory. I'm proud of you." I turned off my phone and finished my bourbon in the quiet darkness of my living room. Tomorrow, Samantha would wake up to discover that her private life had become very public indeed. The woman who'd built her reputation on being the perfect real estate professional, the ideal neighbor, the successful wife with the boring but reliable husband, that woman was about to learn what it felt like to be the punchline. The bedroom was dark when I finally went to bed. Samantha was either asleep or pretending to be, curled up on her side of our king-size bed with her back to my side. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing, and wondered how long she'd been planning to leave me. The answer, I realized, didn't matter anymore, because I was done being the solution to her problems, and she was about to become the solution to mine. I woke up at 6:30 to the sound of Samantha's phone buzzing like an angry hornet. She grabbed it from the nightstand, squinted at the screen, then sat bolt upright. "What the hell?" I rolled over and pretended to be groggy. "What's wrong?" She was scrolling frantically through her messages, her face cycling through confusion, horror, and rage in rapid succession. Someone leaked private messages to the building chat. "What kind of messages?" She turned to look at me, and I could see the exact moment when suspicion crystallized into certainty. "You son of a—" "Language, Sam. We have thin walls." She jumped out of bed and started pacing, phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "You went through my laptop. You violated my privacy." I found it on the community laptop in the meeting room, just like I said in the message. "Maybe you should be more careful about where you leave your personal business." "That's impossible. I never—" She stopped mid-sentence, probably remembering her hasty exit the night before. "Never what? Never left your laptop open on the kitchen counter? Never forgot to log out of your email? Never thought your boring maintenance manager husband might actually pay attention?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage had been done, and how she could spin this to her advantage. "Eric, we need to talk." "No, Sam, we really don't." I got up, grabbed my clothes, and headed for the bathroom. Behind me, I could hear her phone buzzing again, followed by a string of words that would have made my old police buddies blush. By the time I finished my shower and got dressed, she was in the kitchen, fully clothed and clutching a cup of coffee like a lifeline. Her laptop was closed, and her phone was face down on the counter. "How bad is it?" I asked, pouring my own coffee. "How bad is what?" "The fallout, the gossip, the complete destruction of your carefully crafted reputation." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You don't understand. This could ruin my career." "Your career." "Right." I took a sip of coffee and studied her face. "What about our marriage? Any concern about what this might do to that?" "Our marriage?" She trailed off, and for the first time in months, she looked genuinely vulnerable. "Eric, I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. "I see." I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. "Well, Sam, I hope Brandon's worth it. because you're about to find out what life looks like when you're not the queen of the building anymore. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, leaving her standing in our perfect kitchen with her perfect life crumbling around her perfectly manicured feet. The hallway was unusually quiet as I walked to the elevator, but I could feel eyes watching me through peepholes. By the time I reached the lobby, Mrs. Quimby was waiting by the mailboxes, practically vibrating with excitement. "Eric, dear, I just wanted you to know that some of us always suspected something was going on. The way she looked at that young man, and him with a girlfriend and everything. Thank you, Mrs. Quimby. I appreciate your support. If you need anything at all, you just let me know. I've got eyes and ears everywhere in this building." I filed that information away for later use. I'll keep that in mind. The parking garage was my next stop, where I found Derek already at work, checking the building's maintenance schedule for the day. "Morning, boss. Hell of a night, huh?" "That's one way to put it. How's the building's mood this morning?" Derek grinned. "Split down the middle. Half the people are scandalized, half are saying it's about time someone called her out. But everyone's talking. And Brandon? Haven't seen him yet, but his Tesla's still here, so he hasn't made a run for it." I looked across the garage at the sleek white Model S parked in space 4B, and an idea began to form in my mind. A terrible, petty, absolutely perfect idea. "Derek, do we still have that roll of plastic wrap in the supply closet?" His grin widened. "We sure do, boss, along with those flyers for the building's recycling program." "Good. I think it's time we educated our residents about the importance of proper waste disposal." 20 minutes later, Brandon's Tesla looked like a modern art installation dedicated to the theme of consequences. We'd wrapped the entire car in plastic, then filled the interior with recycling flyers and a few strategically placed items from the building's lost and found, including a box of promotional items from the local health clinic. I took a photo and uploaded it to the building chat with the caption, "Remember, residents, practice safe disposal of unwanted items. This message brought to you by your building maintenance team." My phone exploded with responses. Tommy's was my favorite. "Partner, you're an artist." Derek and I were admiring our handiwork when the elevator dinged and Brandon stepped out, coffee in hand, looking like he'd slept about as well as I had. He stopped short when he saw his car, and I watched his face cycle through the same emotions Samantha's had earlier. Confusion, horror, rage. "What the hell is this?" "Vandalism," I said mildly. "Terrible thing. You should probably file a report." "You did this. You wrapped my car." "That's a serious accusation, Brandon. Do you have any proof?" He pulled out his phone, probably to call the police, or his lawyer, or his mommy. But then he seemed to remember that everyone in the building had seen his private messages, and calling attention to himself might not be the smartest move. "This is harassment. This is maintenance. We're teaching residents about proper disposal methods. Very educational." Derek nodded sagely. "Safety first. That's our motto." Brandon's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "I know what you're trying to do." "What am I trying to do, Brandon?" "You're trying to humiliate me." I pretended to consider this. "Humiliate you? No, that's not my style. I prefer to let people humiliate themselves. Much more efficient." He stormed back to the elevator, leaving his wrapped Tesla behind like a monument to poor decision-making. As the elevator doors closed, I could hear him making a phone call, probably to Samantha. Derek was practically bouncing with excitement. "Boss, that was beautiful. What's next?" "Next, we wait. Let them make the first move. They're off balance now, making mistakes. That's when people show you who they really are." And I was very curious to see who my wife really was when she thought she was fighting for her life. The Anchor Bar sits on the waterfront like a weathered guardian, all dark wood and brass fixtures that have seen decades of local drama unfold over pints of beer and plates of fried clams. It's the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do, and tonight, my business was the hottest topic in town. Tommy was already waiting in our usual booth when I arrived, nursing a beer and grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Eric Rollins, you magnificent bastard," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "You've got the whole town talking." "Just the building, I hope." "Oh, hell no. This spread beyond the building hours ago. Your wife's little love affair is front-page news on every gossip network from here to Boston." I ordered a bourbon and tried to process that information. "How bad?" "Depends on your perspective. For Samantha, career-ending bad. For you, best thing that ever happened." The bartender, Mike, brought my drink and leaned in conspiratorially. "Eric, buddy, I just want you to know, half the guys in here have been in your shoes. You handled it like a champion." I raised my glass. To handling things like champions. Tommy clinked his beer against my bourbon. "So what's the plan? Please tell me you have a plan." I'm working on it. But first, I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. How deep does this thing go? Deeper than you think. I did some digging today, called in a few favors from my security company contacts. Your boy Brandon has been busy. This isn't his first rodeo. Tommy pulled out his phone and showed me a series of photos. Brandon at various upscale restaurants with different women, none of whom were his supposed girlfriend, Alicia. He's got a pattern. Targets successful women, usually married, usually with something he can use, money, connections, business opportunities. Your wife wasn't his first conquest, and she wasn't going to be his last. I studied the photos, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. What about Alicia, his girlfriend? That's where it gets interesting. She reached out to me today through a mutual friend. Turns out she's been suspicious for months, but couldn't prove anything until now. She wants to help. She wants revenge. Apparently Brandon's been using her credit cards to finance his little affairs. She's got receipts, literally. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was uglier than I'd imagined. My wife hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been played by a professional. There's more, Tommy continued. I ran into Marla from your building at the grocery store. She was practically foaming at the mouth, talking about how Samantha's been spreading rumors about you for months. What kind of rumors? The usual stuff cheating spouses say to justify their behavior. You're controlling, abusive, holding her back from her full potential. She's been positioning herself as the victim of a bad marriage to anyone who'll listen. I felt that familiar heat rising in my chest, but I forced it down. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. I needed to think clearly, plan carefully, and execute perfectly. She's having a wine night tonight, I said. Damage control session with her supporters. You going to crash the party? No, I'm going to let her dig her own grave, but I might help her find the shovel. We spent the next hour planning, and by the time I left the anchor bar, I had a clear strategy. Samantha wanted to play the victim? Fine. But victims don't usually have secret bank accounts and hidden assets, which I'd discovered while reviewing our financial records that afternoon. The building was buzzing with activity when I returned. I could hear laughter and conversation coming from Unit 3C, Marla's place, where Samantha was holding court with her remaining allies. The guest list was smaller than usual, I noticed. Public scandal has a way of thinning the crowd. I took the elevator to the second floor and knocked on Mrs. Quimby's door. Eric, dear, come in, come in. I've been waiting to talk to you. Her apartment was a shrine to 70 years of living, photographs covering every surface, furniture that had seen decades of use, and the lingering scent of lavender and old books. I wanted to thank you for your support, Mrs. Quimby. Oh, nonsense. That woman has had it coming for years. The way she talks down to people, acts like she's better than everyone else. And poor Alicia. That sweet girl doesn't deserve what that horrible man is putting her through. You know Alicia? Of course I know her. She walks my little precious when Brandon's too busy with his business meetings. She made air quotes around the words, her disgust evident. She's been crying in the hallways for weeks, poor thing. Mrs. Quimby, hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to know what was happening in this building, who was coming and going, when, with whom, would that be possible? Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Hypothetically, I'd say this building has very thin walls and very large windows, and some residents are more observant than others. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, I might mention that certain residents have been receiving visitors at unusual hours, and certain other residents have been leaving the building when they claim to be staying in for the evening. I smiled. You're a treasure, Mrs. Quimby. I'm a busybody with too much time on my hands, but in this case, that might be useful. The party in 3C was getting louder, voices carrying through the building's ventilation system. I could hear Samantha holding forth about something, her voice taking on that lecturing tone she used when she was trying to convince people she was right. They're planning something, Mrs. Quimby said, following my gaze toward the ceiling. Been up there for 2 hours, and the conversation keeps getting more heated. Any idea what? From what I could hear through the vents, they're trying to figure out how to discredit you, make it look like you're the unstable one, the one who can't be trusted. I felt that cold calculation settling deeper into my bones. Is that so? Marla's been pushing the hardest. She's never liked you, you know. Thinks you're beneath Samantha's social status. Well, she's about to find out just how far beneath I can go. I left Mrs. Quimby's apartment with a head full of information and a heart full of purpose. Samantha and her friends wanted to paint me as the villain. They were welcome to try, but they were about to learn that the quiet, reliable maintenance man had been paying attention all these years, and he'd learned a few things about how to fix problems. Permanently. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Boss, you need to see this. Brandon's car situation got interesting. I took the elevator down to the garage, where Derek was waiting with barely contained excitement. So after you left, Brandon came back down with a knife to cut the plastic wrap off his car. But here's the thing. When he opened the door, all those flyers and health clinic promotional materials fell out, right? Well, Mrs. Patterson from 5A was walking her dog, and she saw the whole thing. And she recognized some of those promotional materials. Turns out they weren't random items from our lost and found. They were from the women's health clinic downtown, the one that specializes in discreet services. I stared at him. You're kidding. Nope. And Mrs. Patterson, being Mrs. Patterson, immediately jumped to conclusions and started spreading the word that Brandon's been taking multiple women to the clinic for various reasons. That's actually terrible and completely untrue. Sure is. But try explaining that to a building full of people who already think he's a predator. I should have felt bad about the misunderstanding. I should have corrected the record, set the story straight, made sure innocent people weren't hurt by false rumors. Instead, I felt like justice was finally finding its balance. Derek, I need you to do something for me. Can you get access to the building's security footage from the past 3 months? Already pulled it. Figured you might want to see the comings and goings. He handed me a tablet loaded with video files, organized by date and time. I highlighted the interesting parts. Your wife's been busier than a bee in springtime. I scrolled through the footage, watching months of deception play out in fast forward. Samantha leaving the building at odd hours, returning disheveled. Brandon's late-night visits to various apartments, including ones where he had no business being. The two of them meeting in the garage, the stairwells, the rooftop, anywhere they thought the cameras couldn't see them, but the cameras saw everything. Derek, you're getting a raise. Just doing my job, boss. But there's one more thing you should know. I wasn't the only one pulling security footage today. Who else? Alicia. She came by this afternoon with a court order, something about gathering evidence for a civil suit. She's got copies of everything we just looked at, plus a few things we missed. The pieces were moving on the board now, each player making their moves, and I was starting to see the end game. Samantha and Brandon thought they were fighting me, but they were actually fighting each other, their own guilt, and the weight of their own poor choices. All I had to do was give them enough rope. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Samantha's name appeared on the screen. Eric, we need to talk, now. I'm in the garage. Come on down. I'm not coming to you. You come to Marla's apartment. We're having a discussion about this situation. What situation would that be, Sam? Don't play dumb. You know exactly what situation. I looked at Derek, who was grinning like a shark. You know what, Sam? I think I'll pass. If you want to talk to me, you know where I live. Eric, I'm serious. Get up here now, or what? You'll embarrass me in public? Make me the punchline of another joke? Spread rumors about my character? Silence on the other end of the line. That's what I thought. Good night, Sam. Enjoy your wine. I hung up and turned back to Derek. How do you feel about working late tonight? What did you have in mind? I think it's time our residents learned about the importance of transparency in building management, starting with a comprehensive review of security footage from the past quarter. You want to release the surveillance videos? I want to release a carefully edited educational presentation about building security and the importance of following community guidelines. Very educational. Derek's grin widened. Boss, you're diabolical. No, Derek, I'm thorough. There's a difference. We spent the next 3 hours creating what we called the Building Security Awareness presentation, a carefully edited compilation of security footage showing various violations of building policies, late-night unauthorized guests, use of common areas for inappropriate activities, misuse of guest parking, all perfectly legitimate concerns for a property manager to address. The fact that most of the violations involved the same two people was just a coincidence. By midnight, the presentation was uploaded to the building's shared drive, accessible to all residents. I sent out a group message. Please review the attached security awareness presentation. Building management will be implementing new policies based on these findings. Questions and concerns can be directed to the Property Management Office. Then I went upstairs to my apartment, where I found Samantha waiting in the living room, still wearing the clothes she'd worn to Marla's wine night, but looking considerably less confident than she had that morning. We need to talk, she said. Now we need to talk? Interesting timing. She stood up, swaying slightly. The wine night had apparently been more wine than strategy session. Eric, this has gone far enough. You've made your point. What point is that? That you're angry, that you feel betrayed. I get it, okay? But this public humiliation has to stop. I sat down in my chair, the only piece of furniture in the room that I'd actually chosen, and studied my wife's face. Even disheveled and slightly intoxicated, she was beautiful. Even caught in a web of lies and betrayal, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for her actions. That was about to change. Sam, do you remember what you said to me tonight at the meeting about someone taking me and putting me out of my misery? That was just a joke. People were laughing. They were laughing at me, at us, at our marriage, and you were leading the charge. She had the grace to look ashamed, but only for a moment. I didn't mean anything by it. Didn't you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you meant every word. It looks like you've been planning this for months, setting the stage, preparing everyone for the moment when you'd finally be rid of your boring, embarrassing husband. It's not what, Sam? Not true? Not fair? Not the way you planned it? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to find the right words, the right approach, the right angle to regain control of the situation. Erica, I think we should consider counseling. Work through this together. Together. Right. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen, where the building's security presentation was already generating comments and reactions. Did you work on this together with Brandon? Because it looks like teamwork to me. Her face went white as she recognized herself in the security footage thumbnails. You can't do this. This is invasion of privacy. This is building security footage available to building management and residents as outlined in the lease agreement you signed. Very legal, very transparent, very educational. She sank back onto the couch, the fight going out of her like air from a punctured balloon. What do you want, Eric? Money? The apartment? What's it going to take to make this stop? I leaned forward, looking directly into her eyes. I want you to understand something, Sam. For 15 years, I've been the solution to your problems. The reliable husband who handled the boring details while you built your career and your reputation. The maintenance man who fixed everything that was broken and kept everything running smoothly. Eric, but now you're the problem. And I'm still the solution. The difference is, this time, I'm not fixing anything. I'm removing it. She stared at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, Samantha Rollins looked genuinely afraid. What does that mean? I stood up and headed toward the bedroom. It means you should probably call Brandon. You're going to need all the support you can get. Behind me, I heard her fumbling for her phone, her hands shaking as she tried to dial. But I wasn't worried about what she might say to him, or what plans they might make, or how they might try to fight back. Because tomorrow, the real education was going to begin. The morning sun streamed through our bedroom windows like a spotlight, illuminating the chaos that had become my marriage. Samantha's side of the bed was empty, sheets twisted and abandoned. I could hear her in the kitchen, talking on the phone in the hushed, urgent tones of someone trying to contain a wildfire with a garden hose. I took my time getting dressed, listening to fragments of her conversation drifting down the hallway. Can't just make this go away, Brandon. My career is ruined. Need to do something about Eric. I smiled as I knotted my tie. Let them plan. Desperate people make sloppy plans, and sloppy plans create opportunities. The kitchen was a war zone when I entered. Samantha sat at our granite breakfast bar, phone pressed to her ear, surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled tissues. She looked like she hadn't slept, which was probably accurate. She ended her call when she saw me and turned to face me with the expression of someone preparing for battle. Eric, I've been thinking. Dangerous habit. I'm serious. We need to discuss terms. I poured coffee into my favorite mug, a chipped ceramic piece I'd bought at a gas station years ago, the only item in our kitchen that Samantha hadn't chosen. What kind of terms? Divorce terms, settlement terms, how we're going to handle this situation like adults. Adults. I tasted the word like wine. Interesting choice of words, considering the maturity level you've demonstrated lately. Her jaw tightened. I'm trying to be reasonable here. Reasonable would have been having this conversation before you started your affair. Reasonable would have been not humiliating me in front of our neighbors. Reasonable would have been treating our marriage with the respect it deserved. You're right. I made mistakes. But continuing this public campaign against me isn't going to fix anything. I studied her face, noting the careful makeup applied to hide the evidence of her sleepless night, the designer clothes chosen to project confidence she didn't feel, the practiced posture of someone accustomed to negotiating from a position of strength. Sam, do you know what I learned in my 20 years as a police officer? What? That people don't change when they're comfortable. They only change when they're forced to confront consequences they can't avoid or manipulate. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face went pale. What now? I asked. Brandon's girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, she's filed a civil suit against both of us. Alicia, What kind of suit? Fraud, emotional distress, conspiracy. She scrolled through the message, her voice getting smaller with each word. She's claiming we conspired to defraud her financially and emotionally. I felt a moment of genuine sympathy for Alicia, followed by a wave of satisfaction that justice was finding its own channels. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. Eric, she's asking for damages in the 6 figures. She has evidence, financial records, communications, witness testimony. Sounds like she's been thorough. Samantha stared at me, and I could see the moment when she realized I wasn't going to help her, wasn't going to fix this problem like I'd fixed so many others over the years. You're enjoying this? I'm observing it. There's a difference. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. Tommy's name appeared on the screen. Morning, partner. You need to get down to the marina, now. What's happening? Your boy Brandon decided to take his boat out for an early morning cruise. Problem is, he forgot to check the weather report. Coast Guard's bringing him back in about 20 minutes, and half the town's going to be watching. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, leaving Samantha sitting in our kitchen with her phone and her problems. Where are you going? She called after me. To watch the show. The marina was buzzing with activity when I arrived. A small crowd had gathered on the pier, watching the Coast Guard cutter escort a familiar white speedboat toward the dock. Even from a distance, I could see Brandon's distinctive profile in the boat's cockpit, and he didn't look happy. Tommy was waiting by the harbor master's office, grinning like he'd won the lottery. What happened? I asked. Near as I can tell, our tech entrepreneur decided to take his boat out at dawn, probably trying to clear his head or escape the drama. But he didn't check the marine forecast, didn't file a float plan, and didn't notice the small craft advisory. So the Coast Guard had to rescue him? Rescue might be a strong word. More like escort him back to safety after he got caught in rough seas and panicked. But the important thing is, everyone's going to know about it. The Coast Guard cutter pulled alongside the dock, and Brandon's boat was guided into its slip. Even from 50 yards away, I could see that he was soaked, shaking, and thoroughly humiliated. The crowd began to disperse as the excitement died down, but I noticed several people taking photos and videos with their phones. By tonight, Brandon's maritime misadventure would be all over social media, adding another layer to his growing reputation as a man who made poor decisions. There's more, Tommy said as we walked back toward the parking area. I did some more digging into his business ventures. Turns out his tech startup isn't quite as successful as he's been claiming. What do you mean? I mean, he's 3 months behind on his office rent. His investors are getting nervous, and his main product launch got delayed indefinitely. The guy's been living on credit cards and borrowed money for months. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture of a man who'd been using his relationship with Samantha not just for personal satisfaction, but as a potential financial lifeline. He was planning to use her money to save his business. That's my read. Successful real estate agent, established in the community, access to capital and connections. She wasn't just an affair, she was an exit strategy. I felt another wave of sympathy for my wife, followed immediately by the realization that her problems were just beginning. A civil lawsuit, a failing lover, and a public reputation in free fall. She was about to learn what it felt like to be truly alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Boss, you need to see what's happening at the building. Bring popcorn. Tommy and I drove back to the condo complex, where we found a scene that looked like something from a reality TV show. Samantha's car was parked in the guest area, and she was standing in the lobby with Marla and Kelly, having what appeared to be a very animated discussion with Mr. Heller, our HOA president. What do you think that's about? Tommy asked. Let's find out. We entered the lobby just as the conversation was reaching its peak volume. Completely inappropriate use of building resources, Heller was saying. Invasion of privacy and harassment, Samantha shot back. Clear violation of community standards, Marla added. I approached the group with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there, which technically I did. Good morning, everyone. Is there a problem I can help resolve? The conversation stopped abruptly, and all eyes turned to me. Samantha's face was flushed with anger. Marla looked like she'd swallowed something sour, and Kelly was busy recording everything on her phone. Eric, Heller said, adjusting his glasses, we were just discussing the appropriateness of your recent communications with the building residents. My communications have been strictly professional, focused on building security and maintenance issues. Is there a specific concern? The security footage, Samantha said, her voice tight with controlled rage. You had no right to distribute private surveillance material. I distributed a security awareness presentation to building residents, as is my responsibility as property manager. All footage was obtained legally and distributed in accordance with building policies. This is harassment, Marla interjected. Pure and simple harassment designed to embarrass and humiliate residents. I turned to look at her, noting the way she avoided eye contact, the defensive posture that suggested she had her own reasons for wanting the security footage to disappear. "Mrs. Patterson, are you concerned that you might have been captured violating building policies?" Her face went red. This isn't about me. Of course not. This is about transparency and accountability, two principles I take very seriously in my role as property manager. Kelly, who had been filming the entire exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Actually, I think Eric's handling this perfectly. The residents have a right to know what's happening in their building." Everyone turned to stare at her, including Samantha, who looked betrayed by her best friend's apparent defection. "Kelly," Samantha said carefully, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe it's time people took responsibility for their actions instead of blaming the messenger." The lobby fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. I could see wheels turning in everyone's heads, alliances shifting, loyalties being reconsidered. "Well," Heller said finally, "I think we've covered the main issues. Eric, please continue to follow appropriate protocols in your communications with residents." "Of course, Mr. Heller. Transparency and professionalism are my top priorities." As the group began to disperse, Kelly approached me with her phone still recording. "Eric, could I get a statement for my social media followers? They're very interested in this story." I looked at Samantha, who was watching this exchange with growing horror. "I'd be happy to provide a statement. The residents of this building deserve to know that their property management team is committed to maintaining community standards and ensuring everyone's safety and security." "And what about the personal aspects of this situation, the relationship drama?" "I'm a professional property manager, not a relationship counselor. My focus is on building operations and resident services." Kelly nodded and turned off her recording. "Perfect. That's exactly the kind of measured response my followers respect." She walked away, leaving Samantha standing alone in the lobby, looking like someone who just watched her last lifeline disappear over the horizon. "Kelly's right, you know," I said quietly. "It is time for people to take responsibility for their actions." "You're destroying my life." "No, Sam. I'm just refusing to help you rebuild it on the same foundation of lies and manipulation you used before." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to find the right words, the right approach, the right angle to regain some measure of control. "What happens now?" "Now you figure out how to solve your own problems for the first time in 15 years. I walked toward the elevator, leaving her standing in the lobby with the wreckage of her carefully constructed world scattered around her feet. But as the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of her face, and what I saw there wasn't defeat or resignation. It was calculation, cold and sharp and dangerous. Samantha Rollins wasn't finished fighting yet, and neither was I. The rooftop of our building had always been Samantha's domain, her vision, her design, her social stage. She'd lobbied the HOA for 2 years to create the community space, complete with outdoor furniture, a gas grill, and string lights that made everything look like a magazine photo shoot. Tonight, she was using it as the venue for what she was calling a community healing gathering, but what everyone else recognized as a last-ditch effort to salvage her reputation. I watched from my living room window as residents made their way up to the rooftop, carrying bottles of wine and covered dishes like they were attending a wake, which in a way they were. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Quimby. "She's planning something. Be careful." Another message from Tommy. "Alicia's here. This should be interesting." And finally, from Derek. "Boss, she's got reinforcements. 3 people I don't recognize just went up to the roof." I poured myself a bourbon and settled into my chair to wait. Let Samantha make her play. I'd learned long ago that the best defense was often simply letting your opponent overextend themselves. The party had been going for about an hour when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Kelly standing in the hallway, looking nervous and slightly guilty. "Eric, can we talk?" "Come in." She entered cautiously, like she was walking into a trap. I wanted to apologize for earlier, the way I acted in the lobby. "You acted honestly. That's nothing to apologize for." "Samantha thinks I betrayed her." "Did you?" She considered the question seriously. "I think I finally stopped enabling her. There's a difference." I gestured for her to sit down, and she perched on the edge of the couch like she might need to run at any moment. "Kelly, why are you really here?" "Because what's happening upstairs isn't about community healing. It's about revenge, and I think you should know what you're walking into." "I'm not walking into anything. I'm staying right here." "She's going to make you come up there. She's got a plan." I sipped my bourbon and waited for her to continue. "She hired a lawyer, Eric. Not for the divorce. for this. She's claiming you've been stalking her, harassing her, using your position as property manager to violate her privacy and damage her reputation. That's an interesting theory. Any evidence to support it? She's got witnesses. People who'll testify that you've been acting erratically, making threats, abusing your authority. What people? Kelly's face flushed. Marla, for one. And she found 2 other residents who are willing to say they've seen you following Samantha, taking pictures, acting suspicious. I felt that familiar cold calculation settling into my chest. And what do you get out of this, Kelly? What did she promise you? Nothing. I'm not part of it. That's why I'm here, warning you. But you know who is part of it. She nodded miserably. Brandon's up there, with his lawyer. They're claiming you've been harassing him too, vandalizing his car, spreading false rumors, creating a hostile environment. I stood up and walked to the window, looking up at the rooftop where I could see figures moving around in the glow of the string lights. Anything else I should know? They're going to demand that the HOA remove you as property manager and ban you from building common areas. And if you don't agree, they're filing criminal charges tomorrow. I turned back to face her. Kelly, do you believe I've been stalking and harassing your friend? No. I think you've been defending yourself against people who were treating you like garbage. Then why are you so nervous? Because I know Samantha. When she's cornered, she gets dangerous. And right now, she's more cornered than I've ever seen her. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Heller's name appeared on the screen. Eric, we need you up on the rooftop. There's been a formal complaint filed against you, and the board needs to address it immediately. What kind of complaint? Harassment, abuse of authority, and violation of resident privacy. Please come up so we can resolve this matter. I looked at Kelly, who was shaking her head frantically. I'll be right up, Mr. Heller. Eric, don't, Kelly said as I hung up. This is exactly what she wants. I know, but sometimes you have to walk into the trap to spring it properly. I finished my bourbon, straightened my tie, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Kelly called after me. To get some fresh air. The rooftop was crowded with familiar faces, all arranged in a careful semicircle around a table where Samantha sat flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. Brandon stood behind her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The assembled residents included most of the building's gossip network, along with several people I recognized as Samantha's real estate colleagues. Mrs. Quimby sat in the back row, looking like she was attending a particularly interesting theater performance. Eric, Heller said as I emerged from the stairwell, thank you for joining us. We have some serious allegations to address. I'm listening. One of the suited men, tall, silver-haired, with the predatory smile of someone who charged by the hour, stood up and opened a leather portfolio. Mr. Rollins, I'm attorney James Morrison, representing Mrs. Samantha Rollins and Mr. Brandon Pierce. My clients have documented a pattern of harassment, stalking, and abuse of authority that has created a hostile environment in this residential community. He began reading from a prepared statement, detailing a litany of alleged offenses that painted me as an unstable, vindictive man who'd been systematically terrorizing innocent residents. I listened without interruption, noting the careful way the allegations were crafted to sound damning while remaining just vague enough to be unprovable. It was professional work, expensive work, the kind of legal maneuvering that Samantha's real estate commissions could easily afford. When Morrison finished his presentation, Heller turned to me. Eric, how do you respond to these allegations? I looked around the assembled crowd, noting who was present and who was absent, who looked convinced and who looked skeptical. Mr. Heller, I'd like to present some evidence of my own, if that's acceptable. What kind of evidence? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the building's rooftop sound system, a feature Samantha had insisted on for her parties. I'd like to share some additional security footage that I think addresses these allegations directly. Morrison immediately stood up. This is highly irregular. My clients haven't had a chance to review. The footage is from building security cameras, which are accessible to all residents under our community guidelines, I said calmly. Very transparent, very legal. The first video began playing on the small screen I'd connected to the sound system. It showed Brandon's car in the parking garage, but not the plastic-wrapped version from a few days ago. This was older footage, from several weeks earlier, showing Brandon and Samantha in what could charitably be called a compromising position against his Tesla. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Samantha's face went white, then red, then white again. This is a violation of privacy, Morrison shouted. This is a parking garage, which is a common area subject to security monitoring, I replied. But there's more. The second video showed Samantha entering Brandon's apartment at midnight on a Tuesday when she told me she was working late with a client. The third showed Brandon leaving our apartment building at dawn on a Sunday when I'd been out of town for a property management conference. The fourth showed Samantha and Marla having what appeared to be a heated argument in the lobby, with Marla gesturing angrily and Samantha handing her what looked like an envelope. "That last one is particularly interesting," I said, as the footage ended. "Mrs. Patterson, would you like to explain what my wife was paying you for?" Marla stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "I don't have to listen to this." "Actually, you do," said a new voice from the stairwell. Everyone turned to see Alicia emerging onto the rooftop, followed by Tommy and a man I didn't recognize but who had the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. "Detective Rodriguez, Massachusetts State Police," the stranger announced, showing his badge. "We're investigating allegations of fraud, conspiracy, and perjury related to this case." The rooftop fell silent except for the sound of traffic from the street below and the distant hum of the building's air conditioning units. "Mrs. Patterson," Detective Rodriguez continued, "we have evidence that you accepted payment to provide false testimony in a legal proceeding. That's perjury, and it carries serious criminal penalties." Marla looked around desperately, but found no support in the faces surrounding her. I was just trying to help a friend." "By lying under oath?" Nobody said anything about lying under oath. She turned to stare at Samantha, who was studying her hands like they contained the secrets of the universe. "Samantha, you said this was just about getting Eric to back off, not about criminal charges." Morrison was frantically whispering to his clients, but I could see the resignation in Brandon's posture and the growing panic in Samantha's eyes. "Detective Rodriguez," I said, "I believe you'll find that the harassment allegations are part of a coordinated effort to discredit me in advance of divorce proceedings. Mrs. Patterson was paid to provide false testimony, and Mr. Pierce was promised financial considerations in exchange for his cooperation." "We'll be investigating all aspects of this case," Rodriguez replied. "But right now, I need to speak with Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Rollins, and Mr. Pierce about their involvement in this conspiracy." The carefully orchestrated gathering was disintegrating into chaos. Residents were pulling out their phones to record the drama, Morrison was packing up his portfolio with obvious haste, and Samantha was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "You planned this," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No, Sam, you planned this. I just refuse to be the victim of it." Detective Rodriguez began separating the key players for individual questioning, and the crowd started to disperse. Mrs. Quimby paused beside my chair as she headed for the stairs. "Eric, dear, that was beautifully handled. Your father would be proud." As the rooftop emptied, I found myself alone with Tommy and Kelly, who had remained throughout the entire confrontation. "So what happens now?" Kelly asked. "Now the legal system takes over," Tommy replied. "Fraud charges, perjury charges, conspiracy charges. Your friend Samantha is looking at serious jail time." "And Brandon?" "Depends on how much he cooperates with the investigation. But his business is finished, his reputation is destroyed, and he's facing civil lawsuits from multiple victims." Kelly shook her head sadly. "I can't believe it went this far." "It went this far because people like your friend believe they can manipulate and use others without consequences," I said. Tonight, she learned that some people fight back. The three of us stood there in the cooling night air, looking out over the city lights and the dark water of the harbor beyond. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and investigators and reporters. There would be trials and depositions and plea bargains. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. "Eric," Tommy said, "what are you going to do now? About the building, the job, your life?" I considered the question, looking around at the rooftop that Samantha had designed as her personal stage, where she'd held court and played queen of the building for so many years. "I think I'm going to make some changes," I said finally, starting with new management policies for building security and resident conduct. Kelly laughed, a sound with more relief than humor in it. "You're going to stay?" "This is my home. Why would I leave?" Below us, I could see Detective Rodriguez escorting Samantha and Brandon toward a police car in the parking lot. Marla was already in the back seat, her head in her hands. My phone buzzed with a text message from Mrs. Quimby. "The view from my window is quite educational tonight. Thank you for the entertainment." I smiled and typed back. "Thank you for your support throughout this process. Your observations were invaluable." "What now?" Tommy asked. "Now we go downstairs, and I pour us all a drink, and we talk about anything except revenge and betrayal and people who think they're smarter than they actually are." "Sounds perfect." As we headed toward the stairwell, Kelly touched my arm. "Eric, I'm sorry. About all of it. About not speaking up sooner, about enabling her behavior, about not being a better friend to both of you." "Kelly, you did speak up when it mattered. That's what counts." "What's going to happen to Samantha?" I paused at the top of the stairs, looking back at the rooftop where my wife had made her final play and lost everything. That's not my problem anymore. For the first time in 15 years, Samantha's consequences are her own responsibility. The three of us descended into the building, leaving the rooftop empty except for the string lights and the cooling night air and the echo of choices that couldn't be undone. Behind us, the city sprawled out under a canopy of stars, full of people making decisions and facing consequences and learning that actions have weight in the world. And in the morning, I would wake up in my own bed, in my own home, as the property manager of a building where everyone now understood that some problems don't get fixed. They get removed. The solution, it turned out, had been there all along. I just had to stop being part of the problem.